Story 1, The Empty House Horror. Have you ever woken up and felt that something was wrong, even before opening your eyes? Maybe it's the eerie silence, or the faint feeling of being watched. Now, imagine waking up on a quiet Christmas night, expecting peace, but finding wet footprints leading from an open window in your home, footprints that end right next to your bed.
This happened to me one winter night. A memory I've tried to bury but can't escape. The house had been so still when I fell asleep, the snow outside muffling every sound. I had locked all the doors, checked every window, and settled in for what I thought would be a quiet evening.
But when I woke up, the silence felt heavier. That's when I noticed the faint outline of muddy shoe prints on the carpet. They started by the living room window, trailed through the hallway, and ended just a few feet from where I was lying. I was alone. Or at least, I thought I was. What would you do if you discovered someone had been watching you while you slept?
The week leading up to Christmas had been hectic. Work deadlines, last-minute shopping, and an endless stream of holiday invitations had left me drained. So, when my family decided to spend Christmas out of town, I jumped at the chance to stay home alone.
It wasn't that I didn't love them, I just craved peace. The idea of a quiet evening by the fireplace, a glass of wine in hand, and a classic holiday movie sounded perfect. The snow began falling early that evening. A steady, peaceful curtain of white that blanketed the neighborhood. By the time the sun set, the street outside was empty, and the only sound was the soft crunch of snow whenever a stray car passed by. I locked the doors, checked all the windows, and turned off the porch light. My old house had a way of creaking in the wind, so I wasn't taking any chances with an unlocked door. By 11 p.m., I was tucked into bed, the glow of the fireplace casting flickering shadows on the walls. I fell asleep almost immediately. The kind of deep, dreamless sleep that comes after weeks of exhaustion. I don't know what woke me.
At first, I thought it was the cold. My room was noticeably chillier than it had been when I went to bed. But as I opened my eyes, a strange sensation crept over me, an unsettling awareness. Like the room was holding its breath.
The first thing I noticed was the window. It was open just a crack, letting in a draft that sent shivers down my spine. I didn't remember leaving it open.
That's when I saw the footprints.
They were faint but unmistakable. A trail of wet, muddy prints leading from the living room into the hallway. My heart began to race as I followed the trail with my eyes, my breath catching when I saw where they ended, right beside my bed. The air felt heavy, charged with a presence I couldn't see. I froze, every instinct screaming at me to stay still. But curiosity, or maybe fear, got the better of me. Slowly, I sat up, my eyes darting around the room for any signs of movement. The house was silent. Too silent.
Grabbing my phone from the nightstand, I turned on the flashlight and shone it toward the footprints. The beam of light illuminated the wet marks, their edges smudged as if whoever made them had moved carefully, almost deliberately. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my bare feet brushing against the cold floor. The prints were still damp, glistening slightly in the dim light. I followed them back down the hallway, my heart pounding with every step.
The trail led me to the living room, where the window was fully open now. Snow piling up on the sill. The cold wind whipped through the room, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and pine.
I stepped closer, noticing that the snow outside the window was disturbed, footprints leading away from the house and disappearing into the darkness beyond the yard.
But something else caught my attention. Sitting on the floor beneath the window was a small, muddy object. I leaned down cautiously, shining my flashlight on it. It was a toy soldier. The kind you'd find in a child's playset.
My stomach churned. I didn't own anything like that.
As I stood there, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, a sudden noise shattered the silence, a faint creak, coming from upstairs.
The sound was unmistakable, like someone shifting their weight on the old wooden floorboards.
I froze, my mind racing. Was someone still in the house?
Clutching my phone tightly, I backed away from the window and moved toward the stairs. My legs felt like lead, each step heavier than the last as I ascended.
When I reached the top of the stairs, I listened intently, every nerve on edge. The creaking had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence that made my skin crawl. I pushed open the door to the spare bedroom, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The room was empty, the bed undisturbed, and the curtains drawn tightly shut.
But then I saw it, a second set of footprints. These ones leading from the window to the closet.
My throat went dry. Whoever had been in my house was still here. I approached the closet cautiously, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. The air felt colder here, as if the intruder had left behind a trace of their presence. With a deep breath, I yanked the door open.
It was empty. But just as I turned away, I heard a faint whisper, a single word I couldn't quite make out.
That was enough for me. I bolted down the stairs, grabbing my car keys and coat on the way out. I didn't stop running until I was safely locked inside my car, the engine roaring to life as I sped away from the house.
I didn't care where I was going, I just needed to get away. My hands were shaking so badly that it was hard to keep the car on the road.
When I finally pulled over at a gas station miles away, I called the police.
The officers who arrived at the house found no signs of forced entry. The footprints in the snow outside had been partially erased by the wind, and the ones inside the house had dried by the time they arrived.
There was no evidence, no explanation for what I had seen.
I moved out of that house a month later, unable to shake the feeling that I was being watched. Even now, in my new apartment, I find myself double-checking the locks and windows every night.
Sometimes I wonder who or what was in my house that night. And why did they leave without harming me? Would you have stayed in that house? Or would you have run like I did? Story 2, The Lost Hiker. Imagine a quiet hike through the woods with your classmates, a chance to escape the noise of school. Breathe fresh air, and feel the crunch of leaves under your boots. You're surrounded by towering trees, the sunlight filtering through their branches, and the sound of distant birdsong. But then you fall behind. Just for a moment. You stop to tie your shoe, expecting to catch up in seconds. But when you look up, the group is gone. The trail splits, and you're not sure which path they took. You start walking, calling out for your friends, but no one answers. Then you see him. At first, he's just a figure in the distance. A man with long black hair and a green shirt, standing off the trail. You call out to him, hoping for help. But instead of answering, he steps behind a tree and vanishes. The woods feel quieter now, the air heavier. When you see him again, closer this time, he's watching you from behind another tree. What would you do if a peaceful hike turned into a desperate escape from someone, or something, that wanted to catch you? It was supposed to be a fun day. Our class had been looking forward to this field trip for weeks, a hiking adventure in a sprawling nature reserve just outside of town. The trip promised fresh air, scenic views, and a chance to escape the monotony of the classroom.
When we arrived, our teacher, Mr. Johnson, gathered us at the trailhead. "Stay together," he said firmly, his voice carrying over the chatter of excited students. "The woods are bigger than they look. And it's easy to get lost. Keep up with the group. And don't wander off."
We nodded dutifully, though most of us were too distracted by the towering trees and the promise of adventure to pay much attention. The hike started off easy. The trail was wide and well-maintained, winding gently through the forest. Mr. Johnson led the way, with about 15 of us trailing behind him. I stuck close to my friends at first, enjoying the light-hearted banter and the occasional challenge to race up small hills. But as the trail grew steeper and narrower, the group began to spread out. Some of the faster students surged ahead, while others lingered behind to snap photos or catch their breath. It happened so quickly. One moment, I was walking with a few friends, and the next, I was alone.
I had stopped to tie my shoe, letting my friends go ahead. "I'll catch up," I called after them, not thinking much of it.
When I stood up again, the trail ahead was empty. The laughter and voices of my classmates had faded, swallowed by the dense trees. "Hey! Wait up!" I shouted, jogging forward. But the trail split into 3 paths, and I froze. Which way had they gone? I chose the middle path, hoping it was the right one. My footsteps crunched against the leaves as I hurried along, calling out every few minutes. "Mr. Johnson? Emily? Anyone?" The woods grew quieter the farther I went. The sunlight barely penetrated the thick canopy above, and the air felt colder. Then I saw him.
At first, I thought he was a fellow hiker. A man stood about 50 feet off the trail, his back to me. He had long, dark hair that fell past his shoulders, and he was wearing a green shirt and jeans.
Relief washed over me. "Hey!" I called, waving. "I think I'm lost. Have you seen a group of kids come through here?" He didn't move. "Hello?" I tried again, stepping closer. That's when he turned his head slightly, just enough for me to catch a glimpse of his face. His expression was blank, almost unnatural, and his eyes seemed wrong. Before I could say anything else, he stepped behind a tree and disappeared. Something about the encounter unsettled me, but I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe he was just shy or didn't hear me. I kept walking, moving faster now, determined to catch up with my class. But as I rounded a bend in the trail, I saw him again. This time, he was closer, standing partially hidden behind a tree, his head tilted slightly, as if he were watching me. "Can you help me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped back into the shadows, vanishing once again. My chest tightened. The woods felt darker now, the silence oppressive. I turned and started walking faster, my footsteps loud in the stillness. But no matter how far I went, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. The first time I heard the footsteps, I froze. They were faint, barely audible over the rustle of leaves. But they were there, slow, deliberate, and keeping pace with me.
I spun around, scanning the trees. "Who's there?" I shouted.
No response. I started walking again, my pace quickening. The footsteps followed, Panic set in. I broke into a run, my breath coming in short gasps. The trail twisted and turned, but I barely noticed. My focus fixed on putting as much distance as possible between me and the sound. But then, ahead of me, he appeared again. He was standing in the middle of the trail, his face partially obscured by his hair. This time, there was no mistaking his intent. His eyes locked onto mine, and he smiled, a wide, unsettling grin that sent shivers down my spine. Then he started running. I didn't think. I just turned and ran. The forest blurred around me as I sprinted down the trail, branches scratching at my arms and face. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps pounding against the ground, getting closer with each passing second.
I veered off the trail, crashing through the underbrush in a desperate attempt to lose him. The thick brush tore at my clothes, but I didn't care. All I could think about was getting away.
I stumbled over roots and rocks, my lungs burning from the effort. Every time I dared to look back, he was there, ducking behind trees, his green shirt a flash of color in the otherwise drab woods. At one point, I thought I had lost him. The woods were silent again, the only sound my ragged breathing. But then I heard it, a low, eerie whistle, coming from somewhere to my left. The whistle grew louder, more insistent. As I pushed forward, I had no idea where I was or if I was even heading in the right direction.
Just when I thought I couldn't run any farther, I saw it, the trailhead.
It was like a beacon of hope, the wide dirt path leading back to the school parking lot. Summoning the last of my strength, I sprinted toward it. When I finally emerged from the woods, I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. My classmates were gathered near the buses, laughing and chatting as if nothing had happened. "Where have you been?" Emily asked when she saw me. "We thought you ditched." I tried to explain what had happened, but no one seemed to believe me. Maybe it was just a ranger or something, Mr. Johnson said dismissively.
But I knew the truth.
That man wasn't a ranger. He wasn't anyone who belonged in those woods. And the way he had followed me, the way he had smiled, it wasn't normal. Even now, years later, I can still see his face when I close my eyes.
Would you have kept running? Or would you have tried to confront him? Story 3, The Man at the Sliding Glass Door.
What would you do if, while home alone, a stranger suddenly appeared at your back door, staring at you through the glass with a look that sent chills down your spine?
It was supposed to be a quiet evening. I had the house to myself for the weekend, and the solitude was a welcome break. I had just settled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, with a movie playing in the background. The rain outside added to the cozy atmosphere, tapping lightly against the windows. Then came the first knock. It was faint, almost hesitant. At the front door. My heart skipped, but I dismissed it as a package delivery or maybe even a neighbor. When I checked, no one was there. Minutes later, I heard it again, footsteps this time. But they weren't at the front door. They were on the back deck. I froze, my eyes darting to the sliding glass door. There, in the gap of the blinds, was a man, bald, wearing a black jacket, and standing completely still. He stared directly at me. Would you have stayed calm? Or would the fear have consumed you? It had been a long week, and I was looking forward to the rare chance to have the house to myself. My parents had left town for the weekend to attend a wedding, and I'd opted to stay behind. The house felt unusually quiet without the usual hustle and bustle of my family. I spent most of the day lounging around, catching up on a show I'd been meaning to watch, and enjoying the kind of lazy freedom that only comes with being alone.
By nightfall, the rain had started. It was light at first, barely more than a drizzle, but it quickly turned into a steady downpour. The rhythmic sound of raindrops against the roof and windows was oddly soothing.
I decided to call it an early night, curling up on the couch with a blanket and a warm cup of tea. I left the TV on for background noise, the glow of the screen casting soft shadows across the living room. It was peaceful. Too peaceful. Perhaps. The knock came around 9 p.m. Faint but clear. At first, I thought it might be the rain playing tricks on me. But then it came again, a soft, deliberate rap at the front door. I sat up, the blanket sliding off my shoulders. My heart started to beat a little faster, but I shook off the unease. It was probably a package delivery, I told myself. Or maybe one of the neighbors needed something. Grabbing my phone, I walked to the front door. The porch light was on, but when I peeked through the peephole, there was no one there. I opened the door cautiously, peering out into the rain-soaked night. The porch was empty, the driveway deserted. A chill ran down my spine as I closed the door and locked it. I had barely sat back down on the couch when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the back deck. This time, there was no mistaking it. The wooden planks creaked under the weight of someone moving slowly, deliberately. My blood ran cold. The sliding glass door was partially obscured by blinds, but there was a small gap where they didn't quite meet. My eyes were drawn to that gap, and that's when I saw him. A bald man in a black jacket stood just outside the glass, staring directly at me. His expression was blank, almost unnervingly calm. I froze, my mind racing. He didn't knock, didn't say a word, he just stood there, watching me.
After what felt like an eternity, the man moved. He reached out and tried the handle of the sliding door.
It rattled slightly, but it didn't budge, it was locked. My heart pounded in my chest as I slid off the couch, crouching low and out of sight. I grabbed my phone and hurried toward the hallway, my hands trembling as I dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm, reassuring, but I could barely hear it over the sound of my own heartbeat. I explained the situation, whispering as I crept toward the bathroom at the end of the hall. As I locked the bathroom door behind me, the sound of banging echoed through the house. The man was no longer trying to be subtle. The bangs against the sliding door grew louder, more forceful, until finally, I heard the sharp crack of glass breaking. My stomach dropped. He was inside. I pressed myself against the bathroom wall, clutching the phone like a lifeline. The operator was still on the line, assuring me that police were on their way. But their words felt distant. I heard his footsteps, slow and heavy, moving through the living room. He was searching for something, or someone. Then, the footsteps stopped. They were right outside the bathroom door. The doorknob jiggled, and my breath caught in my throat. The man banged on the door, hard enough to make it rattle in its frame. My phone suddenly went silent, the battery had died. Panic surged through me. Without thinking, I grabbed the towels hanging on the rack and stuffed them under the door, trying to muffle any sound I might make. But then I remembered, my parents kept a baseball bat in the hallway closet. If I could just get to it, I might stand a chance.
summoning every ounce of courage. I unlocked the bathroom door and dashed into the hallway.
The man spotted me instantly.
His eyes locked onto mine. And he lunged forward, reaching for me. I grabbed the bat and swung it wildly, the metal connecting with his arm. He let out a grunt of pain, but it didn't slow him down.
I bolted back into the bathroom, slamming the door shut and locking it again. The bat was still in my hands. My only defense.
The man began pounding on the door with renewed fury. I could hear him muttering under his breath, though I couldn't make out the words. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the banging stopped. Red and blue lights flashed through the bathroom window, followed by the sound of shouting. "Put your hands where we can see them."
I heard a scuffle, the sound of heavy boots on the floor, and then silence.
When the police knocked on the bathroom door, I hesitated, my body still frozen in fear. It wasn't until they identified themselves again that I finally unlocked the door. The man was already in handcuffs, being led out to a patrol car. One of the officers explained that he had been carrying a baseball bat and a knife, though they couldn't say what his intentions had been. I stayed with a friend that night, unable to face the thought of returning home alone. Even now, weeks later, the memory of that man, his blank expression, his silent determination, haunts me. What would he have done if the police hadn't arrived in time? The thought keeps me up at night, every creak of the house making my heart race. Would you have been able to keep your composure? Or would the fear have consumed you? I still don't know who, or what, visited me that night. Maybe it was an intruder, someone who had slipped in through the window and decided to leave without a trace. Or maybe it was something else. Even now, years later, I find myself waking up in the middle of the night, my skin prickling with the same eerie sensation I felt that Christmas night. Sometimes, I swear I hear faint footprints on my carpet, leading from my bedroom window to my bed. So tell me, what do you think really happened? Was it just a close call with an ordinary intruder? Or was something far more sinister lurking in the shadows? Let me know in the comments, I want to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wolf Tells for more terrifying tales. You never know, the next story might just be about you.